I saw him that night, crouched in the moonlight, speaking to something that wasn't there. It's been years, but I still can't get the image of Okoro out of my head. Back then, we were in secondary school. I didn't even think anything was strange at first. Okoro was that quiet boy everyone ignored. Always wearing the same faded uniform. Always sitting at the back of the class. He didn't talk much, except to ask people for food or small money during breaks. A beg, just 1 naira for pure water, he would say. Or, make I chop 1 biscuit from you na? I thought it was just poverty. A lot of us were struggling after all. But Okoro, he took begging to another level. He would beg everyone, students, teachers, even strangers passing outside the school fence. Some people mocked him, others pitied him. But one day, something changed. It started with little things. First, he stopped asking for food. Then, he began coming to school with snacks and money of his own. Not much, but enough to make people notice. Someone even joked, Okoro, who dash you money? You win lotto? He just smiled. It was a strange smile, one that didn't reach his eyes. I didn't think too much of it until people around Okoro started having bad luck. One girl, Amaka, said she gave him half of her meat pie one afternoon. By the next day, her parents had a massive fight, and her father left the house. Another boy, Sei, said Okoro borrowed his pencil and didn't return it. That same week, Sei's little brother fell sick, and they spent all their money on hospital bills. By the time 3 or 4 similar stories came up, the whispers had started. Okoro is using juju. I didn't believe it at first, but then I saw it for myself. It was late one night. I had gone to throw out the trash when I noticed movement by the mango tree behind their compound. I lived next door to Okoro, so I knew his family well, his hardworking mother and 2 little sisters. His father had died years ago, leaving them struggling. I moved closer, curious. That's when I saw him. Okoro was crouched on the ground, holding something that looked like a small clay pot. He was mumbling words I didn't understand, like he was talking to someone. But there was no one there. Then he dipped his fingers into the pot, pulled something out, it looked like ash, and blew it into the air. As soon as he did that, I heard a loud cry from his house. It was his mother. I froze. My heart was beating so fast, I thought it would jump out of my chest. What was he doing? Why was his mother screaming? The next day, we heard that her shop had burned down in the middle of the night. All her goods. Just like that. It didn't make sense. But deep down, I knew what I had seen wasn't ordinary. Things got worse from there. His sisters started falling sick one after the other. His mother became a shadow of herself, struggling to keep them alive. Meanwhile, Okoro looked fine. Better than fine. He started wearing new clothes, even had a phone. Nobody could explain it. But the night his mother caught him, everything became clear. It was around midnight. I heard shouting from their compound and rushed outside with my parents. Almost everyone in the neighborhood came out. His mother was holding Okoro by the ear, dragging him into the street. She was crying, her wrapper barely tied around her. "Tell them," she screamed. "Tell them what you've been doing." Okoro was silent, his head hanging low. She threw something on the ground, a small clay pot, just like the one I'd seen. "This is what you've been using to destroy us," she shouted. "You think I didn't know? You think I didn't see you?" People started murmuring, stepping back like the pot was cursed. Okoro finally spoke. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the crowd. "I didn't mean to," he said. "I just wanted us to have money." Apparently, one of those men that hang around school fences had given him the pot. For quick money, the man had said. All he had to do was beg and bring back whatever people gave him. Food, coins, anything. The pot would multiply it. But there was a price. Someone close to him would always lose something in return. At first, Okoro didn't believe it. But when it started working, he couldn't stop. By the time he realized what it was doing to his family, it was too late. His mother smashed the pot on the ground that night. She prayed and cried, calling on God and ancestors to forgive them. But things didn't get better immediately. They lost everything. She sent Okoro to live with a relative in the village, far away from the city. I never saw him again after that night. But sometimes, when I pass by that mango tree, I still feel uneasy, like the air is heavier there. Like something is watching. After that night, things in the neighborhood changed. Okoro's family became the center of gossip, and everyone avoided their compound like it was cursed. People stopped buying from his mother even after she managed to reopen a tiny stall by the roadside. My parents warned me not to talk about it. Don't let other people's misfortune follow you home, my father said. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. Was Okoro evil? Or was he just a boy who made a terrible mistake? A few weeks later, his mother came to our house. She looked so much older than I remembered, her once vibrant face now lined with worry. She asked my mother for some gari to feed her daughters. I stood by the door, listening as my mother filled a tin for her. Before she left, she turned to me. "Be careful who you talk to, my son," she said. Her voice was soft, but her eyes were sharp. "Not everyone who smiles at you wants the best for you." I nodded, unsure what to say. But her words stayed with me. Not long after that, we heard she had taken her daughters and moved to another town. People said she wanted a fresh start, away from the whispers and the stares. As for Okoro, no one heard from him again. Some said he was sent to live with an uncle who made him work on the farm. Others whispered he had run away and joined a gang. I don't know what the truth is, and honestly, I didn't want to find out. But there's one thing I can't forget. A few months after they left, I was cleaning out the backyard with my younger brother. We were clearing some dried leaves when he suddenly stopped and pointed. "Look," he said. There, under the mango tree, was a small clay shard. It looked burnt, like it had been part of something that had been set on fire. I stared at it, my heart pounding. It was just a piece of broken pottery, but it felt wrong. "Leave it," I told my brother quickly. I grabbed his arm and pulled him back into the house. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the shard, about Okoro, about the pot his mother smashed. Was it really gone? Or was something still lingering, waiting for someone else to stumble upon it? I don't know. And I don't want to know. All I know is that I don't go near that mango tree anymore. And I don't pick up things that don't belong to me. Sometimes, when the wind blows at night, I think I hear whispers coming from that direction. But I tell myself it's just the wind. Just the wind. At least, I hope it is. For a long time after that, life felt normal, or at least as normal as it could. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't over. I didn't know what, but the air around our house felt heavy. One night, months after Okoro's family had left, my younger brother, Tund, woke me up. "Someone's outside," he whispered, shaking me. I sat up, groggy and annoyed. "What are you talking about? Go back to sleep." He shook his head, his eyes wide with fear. I saw something by the mango tree. My heart dropped. I didn't want to believe him, but the look on his face, he wasn't lying. I got up and followed him to the window. Outside, the moon was bright, lighting up the yard. For a moment, everything looked normal. The mango tree stood tall and still. But then I saw it. A shadow. It moved quickly, darting behind the tree. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice trembling more than I wanted it to. There was no answer. Just silence. Tund grabbed my arm. "Let's go inside," he whispered. I wanted to agree, but something in me needed to know. I couldn't explain it. I grabbed the flashlight from the shelf and headed for the door. "Stay here," I told Tund. He didn't argue. As I stepped outside, the air felt colder than it should have. My hands were shaking as I pointed the flashlight toward the tree. "Who's there?" I called again. This time, there was a sound, a faint rustling, like someone moving through the leaves. I took a step closer, shining the light around. That's when I saw it. It wasn't a person. It wasn't even something I could describe. It was just a shape. Dark, shifting, and impossible to pin down. It didn't have eyes, but I felt it watching me. My chest tightened. My legs felt like they were made of lead. I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. The shape started to grow, stretching upward, like it was pulling itself out of the ground. "Leave us alone," I shouted, though I wasn't sure who or what I was talking to. The shape paused. For a moment, it felt like the entire world had gone silent. No crickets, no wind, nothing. Then, it shrank back into the tree and disappeared. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I ran back inside, locking the door behind me. Tund was waiting, his face pale. "What was it?" he asked. "I don't know," I said, and I meant it. We didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I told my parents what happened. My father brushed it off as a bad dream, but my mother, she listened. "Sometimes things attach themselves to places," she said quietly. "Especially where bad things have happened." She didn't say much else, but that evening, she called a local pastor to come and pray over the house. He arrived with a small group of people, all holding Bibles and bottles of anointing oil. They prayed for hours, walking through every room, sprinkling oil on the walls, the doors, even the tree outside. My mother joined in, her voice loud and determined. I stood by the window, watching them as they gathered around the mango tree. The pastor raised his hands, shouting prayers at the top of his lungs. For a moment, I thought I saw the leaves move, even though there was no wind. Then, everything went still. "It is done," the pastor said finally. He looked tired but confident. "Whatever was here is gone now." I wanted to believe him. For a while, things were calm. The house felt lighter, and the strange noises stopped. I started sleeping better, and Tund stopped waking me up in the middle of the night. But then, about a month later, I found something by the tree. It was small, half buried in the dirt. At first, I thought it was just a rock. But when I picked it up, I realized it was another shard of clay, just like the one I'd seen before. I stared at it for a long time, my heart pounding. I wanted to throw it away, to bury it, to pretend I hadn't seen it. But I couldn't. Instead, I wrapped it in a piece of cloth and hid it in my room. That night, I dreamt of Okoro. He was standing under the mango tree, holding the clay pot, just like I'd seen him that night. He looked at me, his eyes empty. "It's not over," he said. I woke up drenched in sweat, the words echoing in my head. I don't know what he meant. I don't know if it was just a dream or something more. But ever since then, I've felt like something is waiting, watching, and I don't know what to do. I didn't tell anyone about the dream. Who would believe me? Even if they did, what could they do? But after that night, I started noticing strange things again. The air around the mango tree felt colder, even on the hottest afternoons. Sometimes, I'd hear whispers when no one else was around, faint and just out of reach, like the words weren't meant for me to understand. Then there were the shadows. I'd catch glimpses of them from the corner of my eye, quick and darting. They were never there when I turned to look, but I knew I wasn't imagining them. The shard I'd hidden in my room felt heavier every day, like it was pulling at me. I wanted to get rid of it, but something stopped me. Maybe I was afraid of what would happen if I did. Or maybe I felt like it was connected to me now, like throwing it away wouldn't be enough to break the bond. A few nights later, it got worse. I woke up to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. At first, I thought it was Tund going to the bathroom. But when I opened my door, the hallway was empty. "Hello," I whispered, my voice barely audible. No answer. I stepped out, my bare feet cold against the cement floor. The house was silent, except for the faint creak of something moving outside. My stomach churned as I walked toward the window. I pulled back the curtain, my heart pounding. The mango tree was glowing. It wasn't a bright glow, more like a faint, eerie shimmer. The kind that makes you question if you're really seeing it. But I knew it was real. Under the tree, I saw a figure. It was Okoro. Or at least it looked like him. He was standing there, staring up at the branches, his back to me. "Okoro?" I whispered, my voice trembling. He didn't move. I wanted to scream, to run, to wake up my parents, but I couldn't. My feet felt rooted to the floor, like the tree was pulling me toward it. Then he turned around. His face was pale, almost gray, and his eyes, they weren't human. They were black, endless voids that seemed to suck the light out of the air. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Instead, the whispers started again, louder this time, filling my head until I thought I would go mad. I stumbled back, falling to the ground. When I looked up again, he was gone. The next morning, I knew I couldn't keep this to myself anymore. I told my mother everything, about the shard, the dreams, the glowing tree, and Okoro. She didn't say anything at first, just stared at me with a mix of fear and disbelief. Then she got up and went to the room where we kept our family Bible. "We have to destroy it," she said firmly. "Destroy what?" I asked, confused. "The shard. It's a doorway," she said, her voice trembling. "As long as it's here, they'll keep coming." That evening, we gathered in the yard. My father dug a hole near the edge of the compound, far from the mango tree. My mother placed the shard inside and poured kerosene over it. "Pray," she instructed. We all held hands, my mother leading the prayers in a voice that was equal parts desperate and determined. As she spoke, my father lit a match and dropped it into the hole. The shard caught fire instantly, the flames unnaturally bright. For a moment, it felt like the ground itself trembled. Then, the flames died down, leaving nothing but ash. That night, the house was quiet. For the first time in months, I slept without any dreams. The next morning, the air around the mango tree felt normal. No cold, no whispers, no shadows. It was just a tree again. We didn't talk about what happened after that. My parents told us to forget it, to move on with our lives. And for the most part, we did. But sometimes, late at night, I still think about Okoro. Where is he now? Is he free, or is he still trapped by whatever he unleashed? I don't know. And honestly, I'm not sure I want to. Weeks turned into months, and things started to feel normal again. The mango tree remained just a tree, and the strange shadows and whispers stopped. But deep inside me, I knew something wasn't entirely gone. I kept thinking about Okoro. What if destroying the shard wasn't enough? What if there was more to the story? One evening, I was walking home from school when I saw someone who looked just like Okoro. He was standing by a shop on the main road, wearing a hoodie that hid most of his face. At first, I thought I was imagining things. But when I got closer, he turned slightly and I saw those eyes. They weren't the empty black voids from before, but they had the same weight, like they'd seen things no one should ever see. I froze, unsure what to do. He must have noticed me staring because he pulled the hood lower and walked away quickly, disappearing into the crowd. When I got home, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I told my mother what I saw, but she just shook her head. "Let it go," she said firmly. "Whatever is tied to that boy is not your burden to carry." But how could I let it go? I couldn't help but feel that Okoro's story wasn't over. And maybe, somehow, I was still part of it. The dreams started again a few nights later. This time, they were more vivid. I was back under the mango tree, but it wasn't our compound. It was somewhere else, a place I didn't recognize. The ground was dry and cracked, and the tree was surrounded by shadows. Okoro was there, crouched on the ground, his hands gripping the clay pot. "You shouldn't have burned it," he said without looking at me. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice shaking. He looked up, and his face was pale and sunken, like he hadn't eaten in weeks. "It wasn't just the pot," he said. "It was me." I woke up gasping for air, my heart pounding. The room was dark, but I felt like I wasn't alone. I sat up, clutching my knees, and whispered a prayer, hoping whatever was haunting me would leave. The next day, I decided to visit the only person I thought might have answers, Mama Titi, the old herbalist who lived on the edge of the village. She was known for helping people with all sorts of problems, from sickness to spiritual matters. My mother didn't like her and always said we shouldn't visit her, but I didn't know where else to turn. When I got to her house, she was sitting outside, grinding something in a small mortar. She looked up as I approached, her sharp eyes scanning me like she already knew why I was there. "You carry a heavy shadow," she said before I could even speak. I froze. "But I need help," I stammered. She motioned for me to sit and listened quietly as I told her everything. About Okoro, the shard, the dreams, and the feeling that something wasn't over. When I finished, she nodded slowly. "What your friend carried was not ordinary," she said. "It was a contract, and contracts like that are not easily broken." I felt a chill run down my spine. "But we burned the shard. Isn't it over?" She shook her head. "Destroying the pot closed one door, but the contract is still alive. It is tied to him, and now to you." I stared at her, my throat dry. "What do I do?" "You must sever the connection completely," she said. "But it will not be easy. You will need courage and a strong spirit." She gave me a small pouch filled with herbs and a bottle of what she called spiritual water. She told me to sprinkle the water around the mango tree and burn the herbs at midnight while saying a specific prayer. But be warned, she said. If his spirit is still bound, it will fight back. That night, I followed her instructions. My hands trembled as I poured the spiritual water around the tree, the scent of the herbs filling the air. As I lit the match, the wind picked up suddenly, almost blowing it out. The shadows under the tree seemed to come alive, twisting and writhing. I started the prayer, my voice shaking. Whatever spirit lingers here, I sever your tie. You have no place in this world. Return to where you belong. The shadows grew darker, swirling around me. I felt a pressure in my chest, like something was squeezing the air out of my lungs. Then I heard it, a scream. It wasn't human, more like a deep, guttural roar that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I kept praying, forcing the words out even as tears streamed down my face. You have no power here. Leave. The wind stopped suddenly, and the air grew still. The shadows faded, dissolving into the ground. When it was over, I collapsed to my knees, gasping for breath. Since that night, I haven't had any more dreams, and the mango tree feels normal again. But I still wonder about Okoro. Wherever he is, I hope he's free. But I can't shake the feeling that this isn't the end. Some things leave marks that can't be erased. Years passed and life moved on. The memories of Okoro and the strange events surrounding his family slowly faded into the background of village gossip and everyday struggles. I grew older, finished school, and moved to a nearby city to work. One day, I returned to the village to visit my family. The dusty roads and familiar faces brought a wave of nostalgia, but there was something different. The once potholed main road was freshly paved, and shiny new streetlights lined the way. A tall building stood near the market square, with a bright sign that read Okoro Foundation School. I couldn't believe my eyes. Who built this? I asked a shopkeeper. She smiled, her face glowing with pride. It's Okoro. He came back. The news spread quickly, and soon I learned the full story. Years after his family fled the village, Okoro had somehow turned his life around. Rumors said he had traveled to a distant city, working odd jobs until he caught the attention of a wealthy businessman. Through hard work and determination, he built his fortune, starting a construction company that grew to be one of the largest in the region. But Okoro hadn't forgotten where he came from. He returned to the village, not as the haunted boy we once knew, but as a man transformed. When I saw him again, it was during the unveiling of the new community health center. The entire village had gathered, cheering and clapping as Okoro stepped onto the stage. He was dressed in a crisp white agbada, his face calm and confident. As he spoke, his voice carried over the crowd, filled with gratitude and humility. "This village made me who I am," he said. "Though my path was dark at times, I never forgot where I came from. Today, I stand here to give back to the place that shaped me." He went on to announce the projects he had funded, a network of new roads, scholarships for children, and a clean water initiative. The crowd roared with applause, chanting his name like he was a hero. After the ceremony, I approached him cautiously, unsure if he would even remember me. But as soon as he saw me, his face lit up with recognition. "I remember you," he said, smiling. "You were always watching from the sidelines." We talked for hours, catching up on everything that had happened since those dark days. I wanted to ask him about the pot, the shadows, and the screams, but something in his expression told me it was better left unsaid. Instead, I asked him how he had overcome everything. "It wasn't easy," he admitted, "but I had to let go of the past. I realized that no matter how deep the darkness, there's always a way to find light." Okoro became a symbol of hope for the village, proof that even the most broken paths could lead to something extraordinary. To this day, people tell his story, not as a cautionary tale, but as a reminder of resilience and redemption. And me? I still think about those days under the mango tree, the whispers, and the shard. I don't know what truly happened back then or what power helped Okoro find his way. But I do know this: sometimes life gives us second chances, and when it does, it's up to us to take them. If you enjoyed this story, why not subscribe, share, or like, for more to come.